Hi, welcome to Comic Talk. I'm Josh.
And I'm Drew.
And, no, it's all right, though. We can just
Yeah.
Today we're doing a new trades episode. We're going to be talking about Wytches.
Wytches.
Wytches. The Wytches. The Witches.
Wytches.
Wytches. This is by Scott Snyder and Jock with colors by Matt Hollingsworth and Clem Robbins.
Mm-hmm.
People are still named Clem.
Who would have thought?
Learn something new every day.
Yeah. So in Wytches, we see a family move to a small southern town and deal with a lot of conflict, both internal and external. Issues ranging from very real family problems to the supernatural.
Yeah, now this is a Scott Snyder and Jock book, and these are some guys who've now worked together on a few different pieces of work. So what's your overall impression of this trade?
I had a great time. This is really my first entry into the horror comic genre. I was a bit skeptical at first because normally, I like horror movies in concept, but they never seem to do anything but give off a really cheesy vibe and have all kind of predictable, jumpy moments and whatever. This actually had some moments that took me by surprise. Some twists that I didn't see coming, and that's awesome.
Yeah, horror, I've always thought, is a difficult genre to try to do in this medium.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 'cause it's just, you can't do jump scares with it, obviously. So
there's no sound effects.
Those are right out.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's just hard to give a scary vibe in print because you can see what's coming. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the natural process with a comic book, it's hard to surprise the reader because you open the page, you naturally scan
you see the
through
next
the panels as you're viewing. So it can be hard to be suspenseful.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they did a pretty good job here. I didn't find this super scary.
No, I found it creepy in different ways.
Creepy's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And again, like some of the twists and stuff like that, I was like, well, that's really fucking creepy.
He definitely manages to do some good mystery here, and sort of sidestep a lot of the cliches that you think you might get here, but it's still a pretty standard sort of horror story. It doesn't stray so far as to be sort of avant-garde in its telling. It follows kind of a structure that's comfortable, which I felt let me kind of dig down into the details of the story.
Let's not forget to mention Jock's contribution, his illustration of things, and the colorist too, which I'm sure we'll get to later. But the overall vibe that the art gives is just perfect for what they're trying to do, and a lot of the creepy moments are purely visual.
Right. Yeah, the artistic work is really cool. I've always liked Jock. I think he has a really cool, he sort of skirts that line between being a comic book artist and being just a visual artist.
Right.
Which I think is really fitting for this work, because this is sort of a genre-skirting piece of work. It's kind of funny in spots. It's got some family drama in it, and then it's got this just super dark, creepy, out-of-left-field witches element.
Again, the supernatural.
Yeah, really creepy, weird supernatural stuff and strange country bumpkin characters. You know, it's just sort of all over the map, and I think he's a good choice for this book.
Absolutely.
It's a very natural fit.
I guess another thing that I really enjoyed about the writing was just the amount of side plots that are happening. That felt really added a lot to it. I mean, like I mentioned before, there's a lot happening, but it's not all centered around the scary part of the book, so to speak. He is like a comic writer in the book, and we find out, about the story that he's writing. We get flashbacks to earlier times in their lives and things that you don't necessarily understand how they're connected at first, and then you get that kind of full circle thing eventually. But yeah, there really is a breadth of story happening in here. It's not just one arc trudging on and trudging on. It's little bits and pieces that really take time to develop. I think that was really fantastic.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I like how there's all these seemingly disparate elements that are going on in the story, and as you read, it sort of slowly comes together, and you slowly understand why you're being told about these different elements of their lives and their past that definitely, like you said, at first they seem irrelevant to each other almost.
Right. And
how
one
do
of
these
them, it
all go
goes
together?
like until pretty much the last page, I think. You're still wondering like why this is such a big part of the storyline. And then that's almost, for me, one of the bigger resolutions of the story is how that ends up tying in. And again, that's not one of the scary parts of the book by any means.
I think we see that a lot in the artistic work here as well. We see a lot of through threads and things that are small details that are put in that sort of hint at other things and come together. One a great example that I really loved in this is his name Charlie, the father? He has this tattoo that you see fairly early of the Ferris wheel, on his shoulder. And originally I just thought, well, that's cool that they bothered to give some detail and make him seem a little, give him a little bit of character, put a tattoo on him. He's an artist,
Right.
But then sort of later on you see how the Ferris wheel actually influenced who he was.
Absolutely. And even was a big pivotal moment with him and his daughter.
With Sailor as well, his daughter. Right. So, and there's a lot of these small details like that, small things that they add in. The stairs, the way he's bothered to think through the fact that the mother is in a wheelchair, and so the stairs have the
whatever that's called,
the lift, that goes up the stairs. There's lots of little things like this that are added in that end up being used in one way or another that maybe less detail-oriented artists may not have even bothered to think about or use. It shows how much thought is going into these characters.
I wouldn't be surprised if they plotted out the whole first trade before they even started on the first issue. It seems like that sort of care was taken going into this. I wouldn't be surprised if that's why we have such a big gap until issue 7 comes out, which we will be probably picking up, by the way, because this is really good. And I'm excited for this series now.
Yeah, this may be something that we talk about adding to a pull list at this point.
Yeah, definitely.
This has been pretty good so far.
So let's not neglect, we've been talking about the deep stuff, but there are several funny moments in here that I think are fantastic.
There's some good stuff.
So, favorite? Top of your head?
Well, something that we actually just talked about before we came in here, the Dick Brusher moment was laugh out loud funny when I read that. And it's so sort of out of left field.
One of the ones that I had was when he was describing one of the semi-supernatural people, not exactly, but he said she looked decrepit like something that comes free with a pack of cigarettes. It was pretty fantastic.
Yeah, there's not a lot of humor in this book.
No, but there's enough tastefully put in there that it keeps it... it provides good contrast, I'll put it that way. It keeps it light in moments where it's not supposed to be dark.
Yeah, I think that's probably where this is most triumphant, actually, is in its ability to sort of offset the dark, creepy stuff with sort of... there's different elements in here. There's some funny stuff, and there's some heartwarming stuff. There's some family drama that occurs. So you get sort of a well-rounded, I guess you could say. You get a well-rounded picture of this family.
Yeah, which is, even in horror films, that's always one of my big criticisms. It's like, why do I care about this family? Like, they seem nice and they have the golden retriever and whatever. And, I mean, we don't really learn anything about who they are. We just see them and they're presented in a likable way, and then somebody tries to murder them. It's not the case with this at all.
Right. And
not everybody is always portrayed in a likable way.
That's exactly what I was about to say, is even just in these 6 issues in this trade, there's moments with each of the characters that makes you not dislike them, but makes you feel that they're more than just a caricature in here. They're a well-rounded individual that has things about them that if you were to spend time with them, you'd probably find annoying or wouldn't like. And you see how those play against each other as well.
But it does a great job in humanizing the characters.
Right.
Absolutely.
So something I'd like to talk about, what really struck me in this book, probably more than anything else, was the interesting technique being used by the colorist.
He's fantastic. It's truly fantastic. And it even goes in the back a little bit of detail on his process and stuff. And it was absolutely amazing to see. Wonderful.
Yeah, I've never seen anything quite like this. And
it kind of reminds me a little bit of Arkham Asylum. A little bit. I wouldn't say directly comparable.
Yeah, well, this splattering effect, this watercolor splattering that he's doing, where the art itself is digital, the coloring is digital, but then he's adding in on each page this layered watercolor splattering that he's doing on actual paper, and then scanning it in and doing the opacity levels and playing with it. And you can tell that it's done somewhere in between very deliberately placed and a little bit loose. And a lot of it is just to add color variance to the page and give it some depth and just a little bit of dreaminess factor to it, or dreariness depending on the page.
A little bit of chaos too. It makes things feel a little bit erratic.
And I've never seen anything quite like it, but I like it quite a bit. I'd like to see more of it.
I wouldn't call it cartoony by any means, but you can tell it's it's comic. They're not going for absolute realism. But for some reason, the paint splattering on it just makes it seem so much more serious and intense. I think it would give off a very different vibe without the splattering effect.
Yeah, most certainly. The Jock aspects as well. His character work is impeccable here.
Yeah.
I love the look of the characters. Every panel I feel like I understand exactly the sort of emotional impact that's supposed to be imparted to us. He does a very good job of making it very clear, the movement on the panels, what is occurring. I never looked at a panel here and thought, what the fuck is going on?
Right.
Even though there's a lot of strange things that happen in here. There's some real action elements, I suppose. There's a lot of movement, people running and fighting, these happen.
Shooting each other.
And it happens just out of the blue a lot of the times. Everything's moving very slowly, and then we get a fast-paced section because it is a horror comic.
Right.
And I feel like that was really well paneled here and illustrated.
Definitely. And I think that's probably like a prerequisite, I would say, for working with Scott Snyder, is you have to be able to pull off that cinematic nature thing, where everything just feels very natural and like, of course that's there, and of course that's there. And, you have some leeway to obviously twist things around a little bit with it, horror comics, so I don't want to give off the impression that it's predictable by any means. But it does have a very natural, professional, polished kind of look to it. Did you see the incoming with the big reveal of our antagonist?
No, there's multiple twists in here, and each of them surprised me, actually.
Yeah, even the big one, which I hate when I can predict the big one. Yeah. That's when a horror movie or whatever becomes useless to me.
Right.
Didn't see it coming at all. I didn't even start to suspect.
I didn't either. But not only is that one good, but there's other sections in here with smaller characters where things twist and move around, and the plot goes in directions you don't expect, and it all surprised me every time. I think there was only one situation that was set up where I was actually like, oh wait, you're making a mistake here, and then very quickly, like the next panel, the character that I felt was making a mistake realized they were making the mistake as well. So it almost felt like it was telegraphed on purpose.
Yeah.
So even in that aspect, I felt like that was a moment
it's
where
so deliberate. You
I was supposed to know that was happening and be like just one step ahead. Which, interestingly, I think maybe comics, this might be one of the sections for horror where the comic excels, especially this one, in that you can very easily pace out what you give to the reader because it's such a directed narrative process. You can very clearly just give a panel that obviously, here is your hint. This is what you need to know. And done with the care that it's done in here, I think it makes for a really interesting narrative experience.
Yeah, and it also pulls you in ways that are necessary to give you the chucks that you really need, because you want to feel deceived, or at least when I go into something horror-oriented, I want to feel deceived. And like you mentioned, sort of leading you to a conclusion that's a logical conclusion, but ends up being a false conclusion, and then giving you an even bigger conclusion that blows your mind. It's just fun. It's a fun read.
Yeah, it is very much a fun read. I think what I'm getting at here is in a film, because this is very, like you said, cinematic in the way that it's presented. In a film, let's say you have a note that needs to be read and the reader needs to read it. You present them the note, you put the camera on it, and it's sort of a dead shot. right? It's boring to look at because it's just somebody filming a note. But in this context, it's somebody's artistic representation of a note.
Yeah, and you can look at it for as long as you want to.
Right, yeah, and you have the time that you want to spend looking at it. And it's more than just a photo of a note. It's somebody's artwork, which makes it a little bit more interesting to digest as well. So this does make me want to delve a little bit more maybe into some other horror comics.
Yeah, I've heard good things about the Sandman one.
Right, I've never read Sandman.
I haven't either.
Maybe we should put that on our list. Give us a comment down below, down there, if you think we should read Sandman sometime and review that. But otherwise, man, I got this on Amazon. Let's go ahead and I'm just going to throw this out here. I got this on Amazon for, I think, $7. I think it's normally like $10 on Amazon. That's a hell of a deal for this. That's
especially when the first issue is like $50 now and the second issue is like $45 now. Like, I was looking at it and all of these are in like the double-digit prices now.
Yeah.
So you can read it for $7 or a couple hundred.
Right. I think this is the better deal.
Right.
Yeah. So I would wholly recommend this for anybody that likes Scott Snyder, that likes Jock, or that likes thriller, horror kind of comics. This has now made me a fan of the genre.
Yeah.
So it can't be too bad. All right. Well, that pretty much wraps this one up for us. Come back with this next Monday. When we're actually going to look over another Snyder and Jock book. We're going to go back and talk about Black Mirror. That's a Batman series from 2011. Is that
Batman
right?
Series, huh?
It is, right?
Yeah, it's a Batman series. Yeah, it's from 2011. I think it's pretty much right before the New 52 kicked off.
So this is embroiled basically in the whole Dick Grayson Batman.
Yes. Yes.
And really the idea here is we just wanted to go in and do another Snyder and Jock book while this one was clear, fresh in our minds, and let you see what we think about that compared to this. Other than that, you can come back as always on Wednesday night, Thursday morning, where we do our weekly poll list review.
That'll about do it.
I guess that's it. So go ahead and comment down below. Push all the buttons, right?
Yeah.
All of them.
Take her easy.
I think there's probably buttons down there you shouldn't hit because they do weird stuff, don't they?
I don't know what the F keys on my keyboard do most of the time.
Oh, don't do F keys.
Yeah.
Well, that might do all kinds of things.
Who knows?
Yeah. Be careful, guys. Be careful out there.
All right.